Okay, hello everyone. I'm Ori. I'm here with Tom and Tomar, talking about the changes we did for parameters, or the changes we started. So we're just gonna look for a second about at the current situation in Puppet classes. What we have today is we have the smart class parameters and smart variables, and we see here when we try to override them, we suddenly have all of these optional input validators, and then the override section, which is pretty okay, but when you start adding overrides, you have to scroll down and then scroll back up to see what's going on, and then you add another one. It's really hard to see that this part is together and this part is together. So what we did now, make it a little bit bigger, is that, first of all, the smart class parameter has titles now that divide each section a little bit better, so you see what you're looking at. So if you only care about the overrides, you don't have to go through and look at the parameter details and understand where everything starts and ends. And this time, the overrides look, well, I'll take a new one. So this time, when I click override, the whole validation part, which it looks to us that is used a little bit less. We don't have so many issues opened about that or so many questions, so if we're wrong, please tell us. But that was all pushed down. And we have a lot more help buttons here to explain what things are, and they're closer to where you actually need it. So it's easier to understand than just all kinds of help text written in the middle of everywhere. And the matchers, you now add them and you get this table where you can pick out of what you put in the order, so you don't have any typos. If you write host group here and you forget, and you write accidentally hosts group or host groups or something like that, and then your matcher doesn't work. So that's a little bit clearer. So you can pick, let's say, a domain, and then write your domain name and the value you want to give this this override. What you had used Puppet default, which was somewhere in the middle, is now here, and remove this line, all in one single line. Now this screen is not completely finished. Oh, this is the optional input validator, was pretty much the same, just pushed down. What we want is when you put in host group, this will turn into autocomplete, and you'll have the list of host groups. And the order right now you have to add to the order manually, so that will change too. You'll have options to check what you want, drag and drop, change the ordering, whatever. Right now, you can add something, and then you'll get it inside the list of orders to pick. Yeah. Okay. Now you can see it.
Drop downs don't.
Yeah, you don't see the drop downs. No, you.
That's so weird.
We don't see the drop down, but you have it here. I can pick it from here, and we can see it. Okay.
Can I just add that I'm missing the equal sign? Like the equal sign or something.
Yeah, we don't have an equal sign because the only.
Maybe it should be here. Where
yeah, maybe we should have the equal sign right here. We didn't add it for now because we only have equal, but maybe we should have the equal sign here, so you can see what exactly you're doing.
And another thing which is noticeable in the UI, maybe it was there before, but the size of the input, the text area and the input
The value?
Your value and such.
Okay, so the value part will have a button to expand it. We already have a PR open about that with the current UI. So that just, we're waiting for the PR to get in and then we'll add it here.
Okay, and sorry for nitpicking, but there's also the next to the use puppet defaults, the icon.
That's a little bit too close.
Too close. And
Yeah,
I don't know why the
documentation
URL is also pretty huge. I don't know if it's
the
supposed to be.
documentation URL, we just kept it the same as the documentation URL everywhere, like up here.
Right, but it has multiple times on this page, and in the middle of the page, it's kind of weird.
Right. The reason is the documentation takes you somewhere else. So if it's a regular I and it just won't act the exact same as these guys here. We didn't plan this ahead because the documentation was added after our planning. So we do need something here. Maybe Kyle has an idea on how to get it noticeable that it takes you somewhere or it does something different than the regular eyes, but still not look like this.
Yeah, but this is CSS. It's something that we
Yeah, it's
go
something.
through visual QA later.
Right. Yeah, we still have the two editors. We need to switch for the order part and this part here.
Right.
That can be just a regular text box.
And another question, in the order, you have a typo in domain. Do we have any way to validate that, or?
Well, what we wanted to do is, right, I do have a typo. What we wanted to do is to have objects that we know, like host, host group, domain, that you can pick them, and then only if you have a custom fact or something like that, then you'd have to write it yourself. So that would help a little bit. Not so much for the multiple keys, unless we can think of something to put there where you can pick, maybe you can just pick multiple values.
Okay. And last question, I think, on the value, is there any indication for the type, like if it's an array or something else, or I have to figure out from the top?
Not right now. Right now you still have to figure out from the top, but it's easier to scroll up to here than if you had like 5 values and you were somewhere down there.
Yeah, but it's one of the features which we talked about.
That's later on. Yeah, it's features that we want to add, but it will take some time.
It's going to enter at some point.
The only question I have is, because this page is pretty long and it's going to get longer if you have lots of values, if we should show, keep it in one long page, or maybe, use this accordion where you could maybe hide, like the order by default is good enough, so you don't have to, unless you click on it, only then, I don't know, maybe, it's a UX question, but if there's a way to hide some of the things, because I'm guessing that the first time you're editing the class, your parameter you care. Hello?
Kyle?
Yeah. Okay. So
you hear your background noise, but we can't hear what you're trying to say.
Okay, so I was just saying that there's probably different times the user interacts with this page. The first time you import a new Puppet class, you probably care about at least the initial stuff, like maybe the default, whether you override it in general or not, and not necessarily key in all the values. And there's another time, and maybe you care about the order. And there's another time where you actually go and come in just to add another matcher. So I'm just wondering if these are two different distinct scenarios or not.
One second. We had a request to see our screen. Kyle? Kyle is on with us, so maybe.
So when we originally started talking about this, Ohad, we had a mechanism where when you hit the override, some of this stuff would appear, which is not reflected here. But I think what's going to be really helpful here is the information telling people what this is. I know that it's a lot of information, and potentially having to ingest all that if you want to just do something simple. That's definitely an issue. But I think having it separated and hidden makes that problem worse. So I like the idea of only exposing once you click like the override checkbox or whatever, and progressively revealing it. But having it like in a tab to save space doesn't really help. I think just having that those matchers on a single line will really help with that issue, and it feels less overwhelming like that as well. So it's a good first step, but doing some of the more advanced things like we talked about with the value field getting larger or smaller, and some of the things we talked about that we got pushed off, I think they'll really help later.
I think another thing about that is that this looks really large now because of the enlarged resolution.
Zoom in.
But if you look at it at regular size, this is what you would see on a normal screen. So it's not that big of a screen.
If you have a lot of matchers there, then it would be kind of long. But I don't know how many times you'd actually go and go through all of them.
The common use case we talked about was like less than 5, generally. So that's kind of what we planned for.
My only concern was that you have to scroll up and down, to figure out what is the default value, or whether it's a Boolean or an array or stuff like that. If that's not the case, then I'm fine with it.
Well, on this screen, you don't exactly. I mean, if I add 5, even 6, I can still see the parameter type and the default value here.
Okay. But it's kind of odd that you guys put the validator at the bottom, because it belongs to the input validation. So in my eyes, like everything that is generic goes in the top, and then if I look at the specific matchers, and this is a different section. It's kind of weird that you define its array type at the top, and then somewhere at the bottom, after I finish entering the matchers, I have another potential enhancement to the input validation. I don't know.
There were 2 thoughts here. One is that you might decide on the validator there before you start adding matchers, and then it's pretty close to the default value and the type. And the second thing is that you just add matchers more times. And exactly what you said about when you add a matcher, you want to see the default value and everything. So it's like when the screen is empty, it doesn't have matchers yet, then everything is a little bit more close together. Then you can see the validator type. You can choose whatever you want there. And then when you start adding matchers and you go back and add more matchers, is probably more common than changing your validations there. And so you want that closer to the parameter type and default value. You might be wrong here.
I mean, the fact is that the default value and the matchers, I mean, they're all values, right? So I would imagine we could, maybe it's a thought to join those together, and even
Take the value up.
Yeah, or it's just like, it feels to me one section is about the type, the parameter in general, and another section is about the specific permutation of that variable. The value.
I think with that is taking the parameter type and the validations up before add override. Just putting them up here after the parameter details, because it maybe is more closer to the details, and then have the add override section with everything else. But then again, you'd have the parameter type very high up. It will be hard to see after probably 3 matchers.
Okay. Another thing, you could consider putting the Puppet environments maybe in the header or somewhere. I don't know if because now it's kind of it's like a disabled form. Also, the parameter name could be as a header. They're both things you don't really edit.
Right.
Give you some space.
Yeah. I'm thinking of smart variables that still it will be global parameters, but that you can decide the parameter name there, but maybe it should be different. Just have that section just for the global parameters, and here have the parameter name and Puppet environments as a header. Okay, we'll move on. Tom will show the changes he did on the host form for parameters tab, well, host and host group, but we'll demonstrate the host form.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just show the current status. Let's go to a host and edit.
That's my head.
Huh?
That's it, no, this
Yeah, I
is
want to show
my
this. I want to show the current status. And we'll go to parameters, and you see this whole huge mess. And I want to override cluster owner on common repos. So I'll press the override button, and something happened. Apparently it went here. So I'll need to edit that and say, no, this is not Ohad, this is Tom Pascal. And then I can submit that. You obviously see the uncomfortableness of what's going on here. Let's move to the same place. All hosts. And edit.
second one.
This one. Okay. We'll go to parameters. We have Apache. And this has a little less parameters, but what I do is I press the override button. This becomes grayed out, and I can override that value with BBB. If I want to remove, I just press the remove button, and it's a little buggy. it's a little buggy.
Okay, yeah, this
but,
this form Tom just started working on yesterday, so it's still a little bit buggy.
But the idea is that this thing makes much more sense in terms of we don't have to scroll down, and it is really, as you see, it's really horrible when there are a lot of parameters on that host. That's basically it.
We want to show just the rest. Well, there's also the two tabs here, that Puppet parameters and global parameters. We haven't touched this part yet, so it doesn't look exactly like it's supposed to look. So I want to go to the wireframes and show you a little bit how it's supposed to look, since we've just started that one. So first of all, what we already saw on the Puppet classes, so we expect this part to be drag and drop, and of course the fact that we have the expand here that I was talking about. And if I go to the host page, it's supposed to show for each Puppet class to see all of the values where you can override that Tom already showed. And the global parameter is not currently wireframe, but should see, like, this part is more like the global parameters, what came from everywhere else. The wireframes also show the index page of global parameters. That's going to change a little bit. We won't have Puppet class there, but what we have today for smart variables is pretty much what you'll see for global parameters. So you'll see the parameter and how many values, how many overrides it has there. You can delete it from here, not only from wherever you use the global parameter, but that's the next stage when we merge global parameters and smart variables. Anything else?
Would that include also, extending the UI, like for password input, or?
Yeah. So when merging global parameters and smart variables, we would want to keep the password option that global parameters has today, but then take the fact that we have all the overrides in smart variables. So instead of defining a new global parameter in each place, you can just override it like smart variables. and also the fact that you have all kinds of types of parameters and not only strings, which is part of the complaints we got about global parameters. Any other questions? We're not on IRC, so if you see something there, please tell us.
No questions yet. What will be the next steps afterwards, or is this is that the whole story, or?
So the next step is the part with global parameters and smart variables, merging them. First of all, finishing the host and host group page, and then merging smart variables and global parameters, adding them to domain, operating system, everything that has its own parameters today will have will look a little bit different.
Would that include also all the measures that domain has, also if there are smart parameters? Like now there is a domain parameter, which is a kind of a global parameter.
Yeah, that's what we were planning.
Okay.
It might not be on the first step. It might be in 2 steps. First, the completely global, and then changing the domain. But the plan was that instead of having domain parameters by itself, you would have this global parameter with a matcher for domain. And then you'd see it on the domain parameters tab like you have with host today. Kyle, did I miss anything?
No, I don't think so. I think it's important just to note kind of, it's hard to get a complete idea of what's the whole design without looking at the wireframes. You know, just looking at what's live, that's only just a small piece of it. But getting an idea of how the whole thing would work is key when looking at those wireframes.
Right. We sent out the wireframes. I can post them again on the event page or with the recording. And we have one question from Mark. So the plan is to keep smart class variables and smart class parameters separate, or is it just for phase 1? So Mark, we plan to turn smart variables into global parameters. So you won't have smart class parameters and smart variables. You'd have smart class parameters, and then the global parameters, you would add a matcher for puppet class, just like I said you would do for a domain. So phase 1, everything is staying as is, and we're just changing the UI. And we started also taking out the casting and the validations out of smart class parameters. And also, in the next phase, we'll be taking the password helper out of global parameters. And then the next stage is just having smart class parameters just for puppet class, and the rest, including puppet class, would have global parameters that they can override. So there'd be a matcher for puppet class or a matcher for domain, and you'd see it accordingly in the correct tab. Any more questions? Okay, so I'll stop now. We had a couple of discussions open up. That we had a questionnaire, and we sent out the wireframes. I'll send them again with the recording, so if anyone has more questions, you can ask there. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks, guys.